Now, across Texas, the issue is.
I'm Stephen Dial in Dallas.
I'm Rudy Koski in Austin.
And I'm Greg Grugan in Houston. And this is Texas, the issue is.
Last week, we talked to Texas Senator Ted Cruz. This week, we will hear from his opponent, Dallas Congressman Colin Allred. Allred knows it's an uphill climb, but he says he's ready to call Ted Cruz out for what he says is not working in the best interest of Texans.
That on November 5th, we're going to shock a lot of people.
You talked about shock. I don't think that shock can happen without the Democratic Party being energized and people turning out to the polls. Will a rematch of President Biden and former President Donald Trump make turnout low for Democrats, or do you think something may change in the next couple of months?
I think there's going to be incredible enthusiasm around this election. In part because of the stakes, in part because I think we are now seeing the kind of crystallization of who's going to actually be on the ballot. And I talked to a lot of folks over time who didn't know what that was actually going to look like. So I think there's certainly going to be that excitement there. But what our task, I think, in my campaign has to be, which is to, of course, turn out folks and make sure that we can get our fellow Texans involved in their democracy. But also to reach out to independents and Republicans and say, listen, I am the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation. I'm running against the most extreme senator in the country. We're not an extreme state. Our freedoms are at risk. We have to make sure we protect and restore those freedoms. Let's do it together. Let's build a broad coalition of Texans to reject an extremist like Ted Cruz.
Democrats have not won statewide in decades. What makes you think this year is different?
Well, I'm used to overcoming long odds, I guess you could say. I was raised by a single mom in Dallas. I was a public school teacher. Didn't seem very likely when I was growing up that I'd be here in this seat as a member of Congress. But also I got here by beating a long-term incumbent who nobody thought could be beaten. And what I recognize is that there are so many Texans out there who believe that it's time for us to have some fresh ideas and new leadership and to go in a different direction and not have a senator who's only cared about themselves.
When you locked up the nomination, the senator's campaign rolled out an ad that said Democrats for Ted Cruz. Do you think Democrats are breaking with the party and siding with the senator?
He's been proudly an extremist, and so I don't see any crossover here. And when I was in the NFL, we used to say, check the tape because the tape doesn't lie. And for Ted Cruz, the tape is very clear that for 12 years he's been an extremist. He's been a right-wing extremist. He's been proud of that. And I think it's actually kind of laughable that at this point he's trying to show that he has some level of moderation when for 12 years he's been so proud that he doesn't.
Let's talk about the border. It is definitely a priority for a lot of voters heading into November. I know you and some Democrats sided with Republicans when it came to trying to do something. That bill has not come up on the House floor, the bipartisan bill. Do you think Ted Cruz is wrong in opposing that bill?
I do think that Ted Cruz is entirely wrong to oppose that bill, and I don't know why he refuses to help us secure the border. And to me, he's been pretty blatant that he wants to run on this issue in November. To me, that should be so offensive to every single Texan. We are impacted by this crisis at our border more than any other state. And to have a senator who has a chance to help us provide literally billions of dollars in border security funds, additional border security agents, additional immigration judges, additional personnel to speed up the asylum process, billions of dollars for our border communities as well. And to say no to that, because what you really want to do is talk about the chaos in the election when you could help solve it. To me, every Texan has to look at that very closely and say, is that really what we want in a United States senator?
The House passed a bill that would ban TikTok if they did not divest from their Chinese parent company. You voted with the majority for that bill. Why do you think that is needed?
Yeah, I really want to talk to Texans about this, and I hope that they can understand. I'm a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the threat from our foreign adversaries is very real. And when you have such an influential app controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, it's a problem for us. It's a national security problem for us. And so what we're doing here is not banning TikTok. What we're doing here is saying that they must divest, that their ownership has to be separate, that this is a national security threat for us, and that this has to change. We've done this before with the other apps in the past. We've done this in other areas of our economy.
Dallas Congressman Colin Allred on the offense. Rudy Koski, what's your one word?
Congeniality.
Greg, what about you?
Stephen, my word is riptide, the political kind.
The Fox Texas Trio is back. Rudy, it's no secret Democrats have not won statewide in a long time. Could this year be the year?
You know, Stephen, the past 12 years, there has been a path to victory for the Democrats, a roadmap written by Bill Clinton himself when he won the White House. Allred seems to recognize that there is that opportunity, which he seems to be campaigning for Miss Congeniality Award, trying to be the candidate for everyone, which is why I chose that word. The problem is Allred is tied to a very unpopular president, a party platform that polls consistently show is not attracting moderates and independents here in Texas. And he's running at a time when the price for a burrito at a popular food chain here in Austin cost $17. You know, you can count Cruz linking Allred to Bidenomics on that one. The DNC claims that Texas is in play and has promised to pump a lot of money into Allred's campaign, but I think party leaders later this summer, they're going to have to shift their focus to start saving their incumbents. Some political analysts saying that have identified as many as 8 seats in the Senate are at risk of being flipped for the GOP. So I think that Allred will start off strong and then get left out on by himself by the DNC, Stephen.
Man, that's an expensive burrito. Greg, do you think there's enough dislike to flip this state? Enough people not liking Ted Cruz to do that?
At this point in the game, I don't. I mean, if this were a choice over who Texans would prefer to go grab a cold beer with, then for sure the smart, very likable former NFL linebacker would get the majority of nods. But the bottom line here is who will stand up for the interests of Texas against the likes of Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. While Allred has shown some very limited willingness to cross partisan lines on issues like the border, I'm not sure a majority of Texans believe he'd continue to selectively buck his own party if elected. Allred's best hope, and Rudy talked about this, is to somehow convince the lion's share of so-called independents he will not be the in the bag for Biden upper chamber vote that Cruz claims he will be. And that's a tall order given his voting record and Cruz's proven capacity to make the case to the contrary.
Now, the day after Colin Allred locked up the primary, the nomination for the Democratic Party, the Cruz campaign rolled out an ad from some current Democrats saying that they were breaking with party lines to vote for Ted Cruz. Rudy, is this just the people in that ad, or are Democrats really going to break for Ted Cruz?
No, I don't think it's going to be a big in run by the Democrats, to use an NFL term. So, no, I think that the congressman is right. I don't see a big jump of moderate Democrats. The blue dog Democrats going over there, you know, there's still maybe a few exist, but, you know, that maybe they're going to stay home in November. And if that happens and an independent stay home, you know, it's going to be decided by which party base shows up in November. Cruz certainly has the numbers there, big advantage with more registered voters here in Texas on the rolls. Look what happened in the GOP Senate primary race that just happened. 2.2 million Republicans voting, while only 961,000 voted in the Democrat Senate race. That's a big hill to climb. November is certainly a different game, of course, in the GOP. In the last few big elections, they've been outplayed by the Democrats. Plus, the Texas GOP leadership here in Texas, they've spent the last few months burning a lot of bridges within their own party. So if moderates do show up, the economy, I think, will be the motivation, and that checkbox goes to Cruz.
Greg, you'll get the last word on this. Democrats, some of them have been leaning more in when it comes to talking about the border. Colin Allred definitely trying to pitch to Texans that Ted Cruz let Texans down when it came to a bipartisan bill. Will that play with voters?
It could, but Cruz will counter with 8 million reasons why the Biden-supported deal was bad. That, of course, is the approximate number of undocumented people who've entered the country on the president's watch, a number that would almost certainly continue to grow under the so-called compromise. I think Cruz knows that's unacceptable to a majority of Texas voters, and as we heard last week, he's more than ready to defend his opposition to a law which would permanently open the gates to a couple million mostly economic immigrants each and every year, especially if President Biden holds on to the White House. That's why I chose the word riptide, because that's what the border crisis represents for Allred. Very treacherous waters. Ultimately, the challenge for the challenger is to convince pragmatic voters Cruz voted against progress on a crisis, and that will never be addressed with a perfect solution.
That's all the time we have. To see this episode or any of our past ones, go to our station's YouTube channels.
And keep the conversation going by hitting us up on social media.
We'll see you next week, and don't forget to let us know what you think the issue is.